Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Criminal Minds Season 1, Episode 14, Riding the Lightning. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So this episode takes place in a prison where there is a serial killing couple who are scheduled for death row who have agreed to give deathbed interviews. And the BAU is there to try to find out if there were more victims. However, through the course of these interviews, they do find one more victim, thanks to the guy being a little bit too arrogant. And then they discover that the woman is actually innocent, and the only crime she admitted to, she never actually committed, which was the death of her son. But she feels guilty because due to her neglect or her lack of caring, she saw her husband bring home women. She didn't care to bother to figure out what happened to them. Then, of course, he's a serial killer, and he was burying them under floors, first in a shed, then her mother's living room. And then the one that they find in this episode was under a childcare facility. But the only one she did admit to killing was her own son. However, through the interviews, Gideon realizes that she didn't actually kill her son. In fact, what she ended up doing was leaving him with wealthy employers that she cleaned the house for, who were looking to adopt a child. And so they adopted him, and he's grown up well-to-do, cello prodigy, has a full scholarship, and she's been keeping track from the prison, but she doesn't want him to be found because she doesn't want the stigma of who his father is to follow him in life. And in the end, Gideon, despite it going against his morals and his wishes because she is ultimately innocent, does decide to ultimately let it go and allow her to be executed and her son to remain anonymous and to have everybody think that he was dead, while in fact that leaves him the freedom to have whatever life he chooses, which is what she wanted for him as his mother. And that is what happened in the episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we'll now rank the episode. As always, we'll rank first on the mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. So first off, we have our single episode supporting character introductions. And first is the mother, Sarah Jean Mason. Then the father serial killer, Jacob Dawes. And then, while he doesn't really get much screen time, he is very significant to the storyline. And so I did count Byron Sheffield, otherwise known as Riley Dawes, as a character worth 1 point as well, bringing us to 3 points. Then we had the successful emotional impact, which was the mother dying for her son despite being completely innocent, just to give him a chance at living outside of the stigma of being the child of a serial killer. Which is incredibly meaningful and was a very touching scene, especially with Gideon's reaction to it as well. Very touching. Managed to get through to actually being impactful. And successfully so, which is worth 3 points, so that brings us to 6. However, it was only a semi-memorable episode. As I watched, I recalled what happened, but when I started watching, I had no idea what the episode was about. So semi-memorable it is, minus 2 points, which does ultimately leave this as a 4 out of 10 episode. And that brings our mostly objective rankings to, in first, Extreme Aggressor, Natural Born Killer, Compulsion, The Popular Kids, The Fox, Derailed, Blood Hungry, What Fresh Hell, LDSK, Plain Sight. This episode came in 11th, Riding the Lightning, followed by Broken Mirror, Poison, and Won't Get Fooled Again. Now, my personal ranking for this episode is higher than the objective because I really liked this episode and the meaning behind it, at least for the most part. I did not like Jacob Dawes. Like his interviews, I'm like, we could have done without it. He was obnoxious. He was terrible. I did not like him, but he is a serial killer. We're not meant to like him. So I didn't take points for that from the objective list, but personal side of things, pretty much all of the lost points were because he was asshole. He was terrible. However, the Barbara Jean storyline was incredibly meaningful. It was touching. And I felt like it was also very interesting to watch. They build up the tension. They search for the child to prove her innocence. She does everything she can to stop them. Then they finally find the son. And at the last second, Gideon sees things her way, allows her to be executed, calls off them. And like they even find the family. They're in the driveway with the family when they decide to back off. And then the adoptive father thanks them because obviously they know who Riley was. And I thought it was just really entertaining, really engaging. The tension was built really well, and it would have been pretty much perfect except for the fact that they did waste some time on the serial killer, which makes sense given that it is Criminal Minds. But the point is, I didn't like any of those scenes, so I ultimately decided to give it an 8 because otherwise it would have been perfect. So that brings my personal ranking to first place Derailed, followed by this one, Riding the Lightning, in second. Then we have Compulsion, Plain Sight, Extreme Aggressor, The Popular Kids, Natural Born Killer, What Fresh Hell, The Fox, Blood Hungry, LDSK, Won't Get Fooled Again, Broken Mirror, and then in last place for me is Poison. And that brings us to the series ranking so far, where we have season 1 at 78 out of 220 and on the personal ranking at 60 out of 220. But with that, we have now rewatched and ranked Criminal Minds season 1, episode 14, Riding the Lightning. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.